The howling wind had been Reed Mallory's only companion for 3 years, and he preferred it that way. His cabin sat like a defiant fist against the mountainside of Kepler-4 to see, a world so remote that even the Galactic Trade Union had forgotten it existed. The storm outside was particularly vicious tonight, rattling the reinforced windows and sending snow cascading down the chimney. To hiss against the fire, Reed adjusted his position in the worn leather chair, nursing his third cup of synthetic coffee and trying to lose himself in the technical manual he'd been pretending to read. For the past hour, the isolation had been therapeutic after 8 years of interstellar combat, but nights like this made even a hardened ex-Marine feel the weight of solitude. The sound came without warning, a heavy thump against his front door, followed by the scrape of something sliding down the metal surface. Reed's military instincts kicked in immediately. His hand moved to the plasma rifle mounted above the fireplace. Even as his mind catalogued possibilities, debris from the storm, a wounded animal, or worse, someone who'd tracked him to his sanctuary, he approached the door with practiced stealth, checking the thermal scanner. The readout showed a humanoid form, small, curled against the door, and rapidly losing body heat. Reed's jaw tightened. Whatever was out there would be dead within minutes in this weather. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and Reed's breath caught. Huddled against the doorframe was a young woman, her skin a pale purple that had taken on an alarming blue tint from the cold. Dark, curly hair clung to her face, matted with ice crystals. She wore nothing but tattered fabric that barely qualified as clothing, and heavy metal restraints encircled her wrists and ankles. Around her neck hung a crudely written note that made Reed's blood boil. Unsold. Not worth the fuel to take back. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. Reed didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms, noting how light she was, how her skin felt like ice against his hands. Her alien features were delicate, almost ethereal, but it was the chains that made his jaw clench with familiar rage. Slavers, he muttered, carrying her inside and kicking the door shut against the storm. He'd seen enough of the galaxy's dark underbelly during his service to recognize the signs. This woman belonged to one of the empathic species, prized by collectors and underground markets for their supposed docility and emotional sensitivity. Reed laid her gently on the couch near the fire, then quickly gathered every thermal blanket he owned. As he worked to remove her restraints using his plasma cutter, he noticed the careful way she was positioned, the deliberate cruelty of abandoning someone so vulnerable in sub-zero temperatures. Someone had wanted her to die slowly, not on my watch, he whispered, wrapping her in warmth and beginning the process of saving a life he didn't yet know would change everything. 3 days passed before she opened her eyes. Reed had maintained a constant vigil, monitoring her temperature, administering basic medical care, and ensuring she stayed hydrated. He'd fashioned a makeshift fort from his emergency medical supplies, grateful for the field medic training that had served him well in more conflicts than he cared to remember. When her eyes finally fluttered open, they were the color of amethyst, deep purple with flecks of silver that seemed to catch and hold the firelight. She stared at him with a mixture of confusion and terror, her body immediately tensing as she tried to shrink away from his presence. Easy, Reed said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you. She flinched at the sound of his voice, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Reed noticed how she unconsciously rubbed her wrists where the chains had been, the skin still bearing angry red marks from the metal restraints. My name is Reed, he continued, keeping his voice gentle and his movements slow. You were left outside my cabin during the storm. I brought you inside. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound emerged. She watched him with the wariness of a wild animal, tracking his every movement as he moved to check the fire. When he reached for a log, she flinched so violently that she nearly fell off the couch. Reed's heart clenched. He'd seen combat trauma before, but this was different, deeper, more systematic. This woman had been broken deliberately, methodically conditioned to fear any sudden movement or raised voice. Over the following days, Reed established a careful routine. He would leave meals within her reach, speaking softly before approaching, telegraphing his every movement. Slowly, Almost imperceptibly, she began to relax. On the 4th day, she managed to eat a full meal. On the 5th, she followed him with her eyes without flinching. It was on the 6th day that she spoke. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like music despite its hoarseness. The words were heavily accented, but clearly in standard galactic common. Reed felt something stir in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "You're welcome. What's your name?" She hesitated, as if the simple question carried tremendous weight. "Asha," she finally said, testing the word like she hadn't spoken it in years. "Asha," Reed repeated, and he saw something shift in her expression. At hearing her name spoken with kindness, "That's beautiful." For the first time since he'd found her, she almost smiled. It was just a ghost of an expression, but it transformed her entire face, revealing glimpses of the woman beneath the trauma. As the days passed, Reed found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. There was something about her presence that calmed the restless energy that had plagued him since leaving the service. When she was near, the nightmares came less frequently, and the cabin felt less like a prison and more like a home. He began to notice small things, how she hummed softly when she thought he wasn't listening, how she watched the snow fall with wonder rather than fear, how her empathic nature seemed to respond to his genuine care with a trust that grew stronger each day. 2 weeks after finding her, Reed woke to the sound of crying. He found Asha huddled by the window, tears streaming down her face as she stared out at the star-filled sky. "What is it?" he asked gently, settling beside her on the floor. "I see them sometimes," she whispered. "In the stars, my people, my family." Her voice broke on the last word. Reed waited, sensing she needed to speak her truth. "I was Asha Vellani, daughter of the Harmony Throne of Valaris Prime." The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for too long. "My people were pacifists, empaths who sought peace across the galaxy. We had no armies, no weapons. We believed in the power of understanding, of feeling what others felt." She turned to him, her amethyst eyes reflecting starlight. "That's why we were so easy to destroy." Reed felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "What happened?" "The Crimson Syndicate came in the night. They'd been planning it for months. My people's empathic abilities were too valuable to leave free. They wanted us as slaves, commodities to be sold to the highest bidder." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "I was 17 when they killed my parents, my brothers, everyone I loved. They kept me alive because virgin royalty fetches a higher price." The raw pain in her voice made Reed's jaw clench. He'd fought the Crimson Syndicate during his service, ruthless pirates who dealt in flesh and suffering. "For 3 years, I was passed from master to master, never sold permanently, because I was too valuable, too rare." She looked down at her hands. "They broke me, Reed, systematically, carefully. They made me forget I was ever anything more than property." Without thinking, Reed reached out and took her hands in his. She didn't flinch this time. "You're not property. You're Asha, you're royalty, you're a survivor." She looked up at him with wonder, as if seeing him truly for the first time. "You don't know what it means to hear that, to feel someone believe it." "I dunno," Reed said quietly. "I know what it's like to lose everything, to forget who you were before the war broke." Asha's empathic abilities, growing stronger with her recovery, let her sense the depth of his own pain. She saw flashes of his memories, battles, lost comrades, the weight of command, the choice to retreat from a galaxy that had taken everything from him. "You saved me," she whispered, moving closer to him. "We saved each other," Reed replied, and when she leaned into him, he wrapped his arms around her, feeling her warmth against his chest. "I can feel your heart," she said softly. "It's been lonely for so long." "Not anymore," Reed murmured into her hair. She pulled back to look at him, and in her eyes he saw not just gratitude, but something deeper, a connection that transcended their different species, their different worlds. When she reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar along his jaw, he felt something inside him come alive for the first time in years. "Reed," she whispered, and the way she said his name made him understand that this was more than rescue, more than kindness. This was the beginning of something that would change them both forever. The first time Reed kissed her, it was snowing again. They'd been sitting by the fire, sharing stories of their former lives, when Asha had laughed at something he'd said, a real laugh, bright and unguarded. The sound had gone straight to his heart. "I'd forgotten I could do that," she'd said, wonder in her voice. "Do what?" "Feel joy." Reed had cupped her face then, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You deserve joy, Asha. You deserve everything good in this galaxy." When their lips met, it was gentle at first, tentative, but as she melted against him, her empathic abilities letting her feel his desire, his reverence, his growing love. The kiss deepened into something that spoke of healing and hope and futures neither had dared to imagine. Their relationship blossomed over the following weeks. Reed showed her tenderness she'd never known existed, taking time to help her rediscover her own body as something that could feel pleasure instead of pain. Under his patient care, she began to remember what it felt like to be cherished, to be wanted for who she was rather than what she could provide. The night they finally came together completely, it was Asha who initiated it. She'd been watching him repair equipment by lamplight, admiring the careful way he worked, the strength in his hands, the concentration on his face. "Reed," she'd said softly, and when he looked up, she was standing before him in the firelight, beautiful and unafraid. Their lovemaking was a revelation for both of them. Reed had never experienced anything like the emotional connection. Her empathic abilities created feeling her pleasure as his own, sharing not just physical sensation, but the deep spiritual bond that grew between them. For Asha, it was the final step in reclaiming herself, in understanding that her body was her own. That intimacy could be about love and choice rather than dominance and control. Afterward, as they lay entwined by the fire, Reed traced patterns on her purple skin while she told him about Valaris Prime, about crystal cities and harmony gardens, about a peaceful world that existed now only in memory. "I want to go back," she said suddenly. "Not to stay, but to see if anything remains. To honor my people." Reed's arms tightened around her. "Then we'll go. It's dangerous. The syndicate still controls that sector." "I'm not afraid of the syndicate," Reed said, his voice carrying echoes of the soldier he'd been. "I'm more afraid of spending my life wondering what if." 3 days later, the scanners detected incoming ships. Reed's blood ran cold as he recognized the energy signatures: syndicate vessels, fast and armed. "They found me," Asha whispered, terror creeping back into her voice. "Not just found," Reed said grimly, checking his weapons. "Someone told them where to look." The first attack came at dawn. Reed's military training kicked in as he defended their cabin, but he knew they were outgunned and outnumbered. As plasma bolts shattered the windows and the door exploded inward, he grabbed Ash's hand, the back exit. Now, they fled into the snow-covered wilderness, syndicate soldiers in pursuit. Reed knew these mountains, but their enemies had technology and numbers. As they ran through the bitter cold, Ash's hand in his, Reed made a decision that would change everything. For 3 days, they evaded capture in the frozen wilderness. Reed's survival skills kept them alive, but he knew they couldn't run forever. The syndicate had brought trackers, and their equipment was too sophisticated to avoid indefinitely. On the third night, huddled in a cave while enemy search beams swept the mountainside, Reed made his choice. "I'm going back," he told Asha. "Back to the people I used to know, the Galactic Defense Force." Ash's eyes widened. "You said you'd never return to that life." "I lied to myself about a lot of things," Reed said, pulling her close. "But not about this. Not about you. Your people deserve justice, and you deserve to reclaim your birthright. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me." "It's not sacrifice," Reed said softly. "It's choice. For the first time in years, I'm choosing to fight for something that matters." They made contact with Reed's former commander, Admiral Hayes, using an encrypted channel Reed had sworn he'd never use again. The reunion was tense but productive. The GDF had been building a case against the syndicate for years, but they'd lacked the evidence and insider knowledge to act decisively. Ash's testimony, combined with Reed's tactical knowledge and the location of the syndicate's base operations, provided everything they needed. The final confrontation came in the space above Valaris Prime. Reed piloted a stealth fighter while Asha coordinated the empathic survivors. They'd managed to locate dozens of her people who'd been scattered across The galaxy as slaves, now reunited and ready to reclaim their world. The battle was fierce but decisive. The syndicate's leadership was captured, their slaving operations dismantled, and the surviving Volani were finally free to return home. Standing in the ruins of the Crystal Palace, where she'd been born, Asha wept as she laid flowers on the memorial her people had built for their lost royal family. Reed stood beside her, no longer the isolated hermit who'd found her in the snow, but a man who'd remembered what it meant to stand for something greater than himself. "What happens now?" she asked, taking his hand. "Now you rebuild," Reed said. "You and your people. You create something beautiful from the ashes. And will you stay?" Reed looked out over the crystal gardens that were already beginning to bloom again, tended by Volani who'd never forgotten their connection to the living world. "If you'll have me, I've learned that some things are worth fighting for, worth protecting." Asha smiled, and in that smile Reed saw not just the woman he'd saved, but the queen she was becoming, strong, compassionate, unbroken despite everything she'd endured. "Always," she said, and when she kissed him, it tasted like hope and home, and the promise of a future they'd build together. In the years that followed, Reed would serve as Asha's protector and partner as she rebuilt her world. Their love story became legend among the Volani, a tale of how kindness could triumph over cruelty, how love could heal even the deepest wounds, and how sometimes the greatest freedom comes from choosing to fight for someone else's